All right, we are live on YouTube. William, why don't you welcome us in, man? It's you and I here today.
Awesome. Hello, and welcome everyone. Welcome to the Residence Academy faculty Q&A. I'm pleased to be joined by the Galactic Ambassador, Adam. Great to have you joining us.
Such a pleasure, sir. Thank you so much. Man, I'm excited. We get to hang out this session. It's William and I holding down the faculty Q&A because we have some of our other colleagues, as some of you might know, in Egypt. Hope that you guys have been following along on the virtual pass with Robert Grant. And of course, Jamie Janover is there and Alan Green and some other amazing people. And those of you popping the hellos and where you're coming from in the chat, thank you for doing that. We love to see where everybody's coming in from. It's just awesome to see the spread of everyone in the world, Arizona and France and Palm Beach, Florida. But we're going to have a really exciting session today. I think we're going to cover hopefully a lot of really interesting questions that you guys are going to put in the Q&A box for us. And William and I are going to take no holds barred here. We're going to be full on physicists, biophysicists in your face, ready to drop you into the depths of unified physics. What do you think about that, William?
Oh, sounds awesome. Yeah, definitely. I definitely think it's going to be a fantastic session. Really looking forward to jamming out with you, getting into some epic unified physics here.
Yes, thank you. Maybe we could start, just give us all a little recap of what you've been up to. I'd love to share a little bit about what I've been working on outside of this space too. So maybe, what you've been up to, William? What's going on in the lab, dude?
Yeah, well, we've been working on finishing some unified physics theories. So there's been a lot of very exciting progress, new discoveries on that front. It's going to be kind of a magnum opus that Nassim Haramein is producing here.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So
in the works.
So I've been taking a lot of the new insights that have been getting gained in this area of quantum gravity, unification of all the forces, all the constants in like a singular unified model. So this is unified physics. I've been doing a lot of work on taking some of these new insights as they're coming in and seeing how they apply to the biological system. The biophysics. And so something that I've just been totally fascinated by recently, it's just taken almost all of my attention, is on this question of the origin of life, biogenesis. And
nice.
Because a lot of the science that is emerging, I think for the first time, is allowing us and myself in particular to get a clear picture of how this big question can begin to be answered. On the emergence of life. How did the universe go from this abiotic ordering of matter to make that critical transition to the dynamic, evolving, intelligent living system? The new science that we've been working on here, I think, is giving us some key insights into answering this question, or getting a better grasp of it. It's a big question, so I mean, it's one that doesn't have an easy answer, but it's nonetheless very, very exciting.
Yeah, not solved overnight for sure. I mean, we haven't really gone into the work together around looking at the proton structure in relationship to DNA, which I still really like to do with you. But that insight, the piece of the structural geometry in the vector vortices of the proton matching the generalized geometric structure of the way that DNA operates, and actually looks exactly like the structure of DNA top down. And the proton being this feedback exchange mechanism where we start to see that protons are storing the information in the universe, a lot of which I talk about in the quantum geometry course, a lot of which is embedded in Nassim's theory around the holographic storage mechanism that the proton represents as the whole universe. But now we're getting down to the actual bits and bytes of it, the actual data storage structure, and the revelation that there are the same number of Planck oscillators within a proton as there are Planck seconds within the universe is, just a massive boon towards us implementing, that theory in a more comprehensive way, and lending towards theories of biogenesis and DNA formation and things like that. So I'm really excited to go deeper on that with you. I'll share a little bit about what I've been up to in a minute. I'll let you respond, but I'll just say that I've had my hands full with some other big projects. And so I've had to set the physicist hat over on the side table for a little bit. But it's always just such a pleasure being here with you guys. And any thoughts on what I just shared, William?
Yeah, well, very excited to hear some of what you've been working on. But I do think, though, one interesting thing to mention about that is that, not only would it be, even just from like a theoretical standpoint, really interesting to see the parallels between the proton structural quantum geometry and DNA. But I think that that'll have some direct applicability in describing the functionality of the DNA, even in so much as single protons have a huge relevancy in the properties of DNA, in particular in what the quantum properties of DNA. So even how it can change, i.e. mutate is another name for these kind of changes, to make new species, in the process of evolution, that process often involves what are called tautomeric shifts, a single proton jumping position on the nucleotide. So I could already begin to imagine how you can tie in that quantum geometry with some of the quantum mechanical properties of the DNA and its involvement in information processing. So, I mean, it'd be a really rich area of investigation, research,
Yeah. Great. Well, maybe we'll have to just get some Zoom calls scheduled. And, I've been eager to see the updates and the work of the scaling theory and how those pieces are coming together too. So that'll be fun. And of course, to everybody out there watching us, if you're in the Zoom with us, feel free to post your questions in the Q&A. I see that we've got a few coming in, but please feel free to add more to the Q&A box. It's that Q&A section that we're going to be addressing directly. We try to keep up in the chat, but sometimes it just moves too quickly and there's a lot of you. So, and if you're joining us from YouTube or on Facebook, it's just a pleasure to have you guys. And we hope that you come and join the Resonance Science Foundation's Academy, the Resonance Academy, and then that will get you into these live Q&As in the Zoom with William and I to drop questions and have real-time answers. It's my little promotional speech there. So yeah, to tell you guys what I've been up to lately, I'm actually going to screen share a little bit because it's interesting how what I'm working on right now as sort of a fun project and as a fundraiser for technology development and to build out some really, really cool infrastructure for the planet is always somehow directly tied to the sort of universal physics and what's emergent. And the fact that you're talking about doing biogenesis work I think you might find this project pretty interesting, William. But I'll screen share because there's some cool visuals I'd like to show you guys. And what I'm going to share with you is really a teaser because we're actually launching this project next week. So I can't even give you the URL yet. Well, there will be, you'll see the URL on there, but you can't actually get to the website until next week. So we'll see if maybe I can convince the Resonance crew to send out a little link for me. But yeah, basically, I've restructured my company, Superluminal Systems, which, by the way, for those of you that don't know, I founded that company with Marshall Lefferts and Teresa Collins, two of our most beloved people in the Resonance Academy. And we've been working towards building this highly integrative system called Core Network, which I've told you guys a little bit about, 3D social operating system and dashboard for all your data across all your networks where you own and control your identity. But to get there, we've started rolling out a series of phases, starting with a project called Galactic NFTs, where we are decrypting the universe mainly through the magic of the geometry, mathematics, and the science hidden inside of crop circles. And so we've taken the structure of crop circles and actually output from the crop circles some of the original mathematics, timeframes, and meanings embedded inside of these structures. And we're launching these as NFTs on the Ethereum blockchain. But these aren't like 25 by 25 pixel little tiny silly avatars that, you know, are going for millions of dollars in CryptoPunks and elsewhere. These are 12,000 pixel wide, 12K ultra high definition images that can be printed into canvases. We do them in full gem color sequences. So there's emerald and sapphire and kunzite and diamond and ruby and obsidian. And then that work is going to lead to the opening of a bunch of different consciousness-based NFTs, where I hope to actually embed some of the puzzles of unified physics that we're talking about. The crop circles contain time and math codes, geometric construction. There's a science analysis of the crop built in. For example, Milk Hill, the actual wheat was studied to have property changes found. And we encode all of that information with the crop circles. And then we're going to do these really, really cool consciousness, mathematical, geometric puzzles to help educate people into a lot of the fields that for you and I, William, are kind of our everyday, you know, where we're like exploring the dynamics and structures of the universe. And so we'll have pattern sequences and math sequences and astro charts and different kinds of riddles. One example is like an astrological chart where each NFT is a planet in a degree in a sign, but you actually can't determine what the date of that is because the planet goes to that degree in that sign periodically based on its travel. However, once you get enough of a series of planets in a sequence that are all connected, you'll be able to decode the actual date of the prime NFT. And then you actually get this awesome download of this prime NFT. So anyway, just working on this with an awesome team of people. Got some great artists coming in, and we're using this as a fundraiser to build something that we call Holonexus, which is an open source NFT marketplace. And this system will implement something we call fractal NFT, which has never been done before in the NFT space, where you can actually have a royalty table in each one of these NFTs, which can be an image, a video, a piece of audio, a course, etc. And that royalty table can contain other NFTs that then point to other ones and then point to other ones. So a simple example of this is, imagine you've got like a drummer in Africa and he lives in a little village and he gets a mic and a computer and he uploads this amazing drum beat and he saves it into the open source Holonexus database. And it's basically out there for the world to use. He gives it away for free, but it has a royalty table, which is him and his tribe. And he gives it away for free. And then you have a electronic music producer who comes in and says, wow, this drum beat is really awesome, and produces a track with it. Well, that track includes royalties for that guy in Africa who never expected to make any money off his drum beat. But now royalties will flow to that every time that electronic music track is sold. And then maybe you have Lady Gaga, or you've got, Taylor Swift remix that electronic music track. The next thing you know, there's massive abundance flowing to this tribe. And this is a powerful way to connect impact projects and people and trust systems. And all of that is, of course, leading to, and I've got other things I could show you guys here. But really what we're working towards building is this 3D social operating system that's like a dashboard where all of the different forms of how you can view things are morphable to different geometries. It's got chat systems, it's got search systems built in, collections, the ability to produce NFTs and products instantly, just like you would a post on Facebook, except for boom, you can monetize it, or boom, you can stack it together, make a course. And this is the deep dive magic that I've been working on over many years, but now it's finally coming to fruit. And we're hoping to have some releases of different pieces next year, particularly the fractal NFT piece. So I don't want to take up all our time, and I'll jump us out of there from now. But that's what I'm up to. And something about working on the crop circles and decoding the mathematics inside of those. And I did some of that with Alan Green. I think we shared that in one of the sessions. It's just so amazing because you really start to get the picture that there are these universal geometric codices, like a library of knowledge, and it's hidden in these geometries. And these geometries are literally being given to us all the time. They're just being, right? They're just showing up in the fields. And the level of complexity is so great. And some of the insights so deep. I just, strongly contest the idea that, someone actually figured out how to weave individual strands of wheat together, in these circles and change the content and structure of the wheat, microwave that in some kind of way. It's just the science really points to there being some knowledge keepers out there to assist us.
Well, and I mean, the kind of deep mathematical codes that are in them. I mean, that kind of goes a little bit beyond just a prank.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. I feel like, like Shakespeare, as Alan Green would say, I feel like Edward de Vere, looking at the pyramid and, discovering that it's this, amazing Rosetta Stone of mathematics. And here we have, these thousands of crop circles, tens of thousands of crop circles that have been recorded, and, people aren't really doing any kind of comprehensive study on the mathematics and physics in it. And I get it, because most of the physics and mathematics are beyond what most people even think is possible. Mm-hmm. And if you just think it's a hoaxer, you don't even look any deeper. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And, that is a really cool application of the peer-to-peer ledger blockchain technology. I've been following a lot of the developments on it. That's probably one of the coolest applications I've seen yet. So it's like bringing this technology into applicability like that is really exciting to see. And actually, I think I saw some folks asking, "What's an NFT?"
Right. Yeah. Do you want me to answer? I'll answer it.
Sure. You could probably answer it. I mean,
I can do it in 2 sentences. Basically, an NFT is fundamentally, it's a certificate of record that is established to prove the right of ownership around an object. What NFT stands for is non-fungible token, which means that unlike a fungible tokens are like US dollars, right? So if I give you a US dollar, you give me a US dollar, it's essentially the same thing. They're interchangeable. But if I give you a gold coin, or if I give you this copper sphere, for example, what's the value of this copper sphere? I mean, there are many ways to think about its value. You could think about it as the raw material, the fact that it's a cool sphere, how heavy it is. You could value it based on all kinds of things, its utility. And so anything that doesn't have anything else that's an exact exchange of value for it is non-fungible. which means it's really speculative. So every piece of art ever created is a non-fungible object. And a non-fungible token is just a way to tokenize that and say, all right, we're acknowledging that this thing, it doesn't have any specific exact value. So it can be traded for, exchanged for it with consideration of the people, anything that we want. And the blockchain makes it possible for us to say, actually, we can know who owns a piece of digital art, for example, or a digital image or a digital video, whereas ownership of a piece of digital art in the past was kind of impossible, because you just be like, oh, well, yeah, it's the same thing. I could just copy it and I can see it on the web and people are using it as wallpapers. So what? I can see it. Well, owning it is different, because owning it means you have different fundamental rights to it. It means you can reproduce it. It means you can print it. It means you can sell it. And so there's this massive, amazing global market opening up in the arts and the music and creation space. And I'm going to bring that to the courses education space around how we exchange these fundamental goods, and what they really are. And I love that you can't really assign a value to them. They just are whatever we believe is valuable and how we choose to use it or trade it or sell it or whatever. So, yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So, all right, enough of that. Let's get to unified physics, shall we? William, do you have any of the Q&A that you've been tracking there? Do you want to jump into?
At the top of the list, there's a question for you from Oriana. And it kind of goes into what we were discussing here at the opening with the quantum geometry of the proton. So Oriana asks, what is the geometry of the singularity of the double torus, and how does it scale up and down as a feed-forward feedback system?
Yeah, that's a great question, Oriana. There's a few ways I could get into that question. I think that I will probably go at it from the perspective of the proton itself, because protons never die. they live forever. They're the most solid thing. They're what pretty much everything is made of. It's a good thing to go off of as a basis, and then we can kind of maybe extrapolate that into other stuff. So in the proton, the geometry of the structure is basically a geodesic, which is composed of Planck spherical units that are generally within tetrahedral intersections of each other. So you've got like a tetrahedral lattice forming a sphere, but in order to form that sphere, it needs points that have curvature. And the curvature is made possible by what I call pentagonal intersections or vector vortices. And so instead of a 6-pointed hexagonal lattice, like you see in the Resonance Science Foundation logo, for example, and the Resonance Academy image that you see, the 64 tetrahedral thing behind William's head up there on his poster, that's all triangulated hexagonal. And geodesic means that you've got pentagonal intersections that make it possible for curvature to happen. Now, of course, a Planck spherical unit, according to Nassim, is like the size of a grain of sand, and the proton is like the radius of from here, Alpha Centauri. So it's extraordinarily small bits within a very, very large structure, and yet you still, for the level of high energy in them, you need this sort of tensegrity pattern connecting and weaving the geometry into this equilibrium-ish state, as much in equilibrium as is possible. Now, this, because of the way the structure is built, the vector vortices, the points in the geodesic that allow the curvature, are 5 in an upper hemisphere, 5 in a lower hemisphere, and 1 on top and 1 on the bottom. And the 1 on top and the 1 on the bottom are the polar vortices. And so that is where the sort of structural warping can go in and actually make a port through the top of the torus, and the pole on the bottom is the sort of input or endpoint in the base of the torus. And those two go through down into the singularity at the core. Now, what is that singularity? What does that look like? Well, I have actually a model here, but it's behind my green screen. One second. Had to break the illusion of being on the Starship deck there for a second. Sorry about that, guys. So this little guy is what's called an excavated dodecahedron. And the excavated dodecahedron is basically my model for the core of the proton, the entrance to the singularity. And here's how and why that works is because this structure, those 12 sides to it, the dodecahedron, each of those are the lines going out into the proton as those vector vortices. And between them is all the other Planck spherical units trying to kind of get into equilateral triangular formation, but they're in tension because they're trying to get into that state of balance. When you get down to the core, every one of these is in perfect equilibrium state with each other. These are all equilateral triangles, except that once you go in to the inside here, inside the heart of this thing, if you can see in there, there's an icosahedral structure of nodes in there. And that icosahedral structure of nodes are now closer together than the Planck length. So while all the rest of the nodes can be at the Planck length from each other and close to that through tensegrity and et cetera within the geodesic, once you get into that core, they're now forced into a position that's smaller than the Planck length. Now, if it's true that there's a vibrational tensegrity between all the Planck spherical units, right, and they have a push and pull with each other, they're vibrating out and attracting together, right, that's tensegrity, then being forced into a space that forces them closer together than they can even generalizedly get to, literally is like a massive, massive, massive increase and magnification of energy. And you're now entering a space that's sub-Planck length. So you're literally increasing energy, increasing frequency, and going into the sub-Planckian realm. And so the singularity of the proton is actually geometrically designed to be a gateway to the sub-Planckian realm. And what we call singularity is literally infinite curvature, right? It's like the point where the curvature goes to infinity. Well, when you go to the center of a sphere, you effectively go to a point where there's no more curve anymore. And so you're in singularity. Now, the properties of that kind of space, I'd say, are still open for debate and discussion. It would be a natural theoretical postulation to say that you're now entering like a potentially what could be described as a higher dimension, the sub-Planckian realm, presenting in a sense a higher level of entanglement with other spaces and locations than the rest of the proton can even do. There's a lot of curiosity around that. But as a whole system, we know that the proton is piping in information down into that core, and then something's happening at that core, and then information is going back out through all of those vector vortices out to the surface of the proton. And at the horizon where it's spinning literally by the time it gets to the charge radius of the proton's diameter, it's now hit the speed of light. And because it's going at the speed of light at that particular radius from the center, there's a shearing effect going on so that the little proton can float around and literally shear space-time and not have the same level of mass effect on the surrounding space-time as it should, as a tiny little black hole. But it's literally a black hole encased within a starship that is a proton, that acts as this information receiving, storage, and radiating mechanism. And so it is constantly receiving information, processing that information, and feeding that information back out into the universe. And as I postulate, storing that information within its structure. So it's literally growing as information is coming in and as it's radiating out information. So that's the fundamental double torus. And I think that most structures that have singularity at the center, which means basically aggregate singularities of lots of protons in a shared singularity state, whether that's the core of the Earth, the core of the sun, the core of a galactic core, et cetera, these as sort of fractal mirrors of this fundamental system have self-similarity in how they operate. So we have some level of feedback and feed forward, receiving into the singularity, propagating out in the galactic center, in that black hole nexus, or in our sun, as we do down at the level of protons. It's just that the way that, we see the energy flowing is a little, I would say a lot looser than the highly crystalline, very precise, equilateral, triangulated tensegrity structure of the geodesic of the proton itself.
Epic.
Thanks, man.
That
was fun.
That's almost like another way of describing the asymmetry in entropy / information that Nassim had described, where in that holographic ratio, he's found that the volume entropy information is much greater than the surface entropy, surface information. It seems like that's another structure that you're describing, because with those PSUs being much closer together, it seems like that's a much higher information density there in the singularity. And since it's entropy, that's also a much higher entanglement structure. So that's very interesting. I'd love to see some mathematics, do some calculations with the exact lengths that you're looking at inside.
Yeah. It's totally calculable. I think I did a portion of that. And it's, approximating it, it's somewhere like around half a Planck length, that first step. It's fairly close to like half a Planck length in the distance between the two nodes. But I think that if it's done in exact precision, it's possible it could be close to the third. Which would be really fascinating, because if it dropped in an octave down to a third of the other lengths, that would certainly match some of the other thirds in the major scale transitions that Nassim is pointing to. So I should probably finish that calculation. I have some of that mapped out, but I need to do the rest.
Pretty epic to begin looking into the sub-Planckian regime. That's cool.
Yeah, well, I love having an object that I can actually look at and I can see, that if these, major bars are Planck length, well, there you go. You can see exactly like where, what's sub-Planckian, and it's the distance between nodes in the core there. It's kind of just forced into being.
and just to draw another parallel between the proton structure and DNA, one of the issues in biogenesis is that you need a information carrying molecule, a memory molecule, in order for living systems to undergo the kind of iterative process to develop from like biochemical networks into a cell, into an organism. You need that information carrying molecule. But one of the huge, seemingly intractable problems right now is how do you get that first information carrying molecule? Because, it's something that has to be reproduced. And how do you reproduce it without a prior information molecule. One of the solutions that I'm seeing to that is the memory structure of matter in space itself. So like the proton being a memory particle, being able to hold memory, being able to retain information. It's kind of like the first genome until you get to like the genome used by the living system, the DNA.
Totally. Yeah. I think that's absolutely right. And it's funny because, sometimes the answer is the most simple and the most obvious one, which is if you're looking for what the information storing molecule is, and you're like, well, it's got to be something that's part of making up DNA. Well, what's DNA made of? It's basically made of a bunch of protons, It's like, that's what it is. And it's like so obvious, but it's easy to miss because, it's funny how our education system just teaches protons are just these like little balls, and they link up with neutrons, which are little balls, and there's like light moving around those little balls, and that's electrons, and that's it. It's like, but by the way, those little balls are also composed of 3 smaller little balls, but we have no idea how those smaller little balls, i.e. quarks, make a ball. But they're kind of like stuck together somehow, but we don't ever see them, and they don't ever exist on their own, except for when we slam this ball into another ball going at almost the speed of light, then we see them splatter, like just really, missing fundamental mechanics. So I'm hoping we can bring those mechanics through understanding of geometry and energy and tensegrity. And thanks to Bucky Fuller, he basically laid us the roadmap of the pieces that we need to study things at that scale.
Totally.
Yeah.
So
awesome. Okay, so it's your turn. You got one, or should I find one for you?
I was going to jump on this question from Richard Herrenberg. It's pretty high up there.
Yeah.
List.
I see that.
So Richard asked, how does life create negentropy? How can I create negentropy? So this is very much in the domain of thermodynamics. So I might start off with a very thermodynamic oriented explanation for this. So how does life create negentropy? If you go down to the fundamentals, the fundamental mechanism by which life creates negentropy, the entire biosphere and all living systems within the biosphere maintain order, grow, reproduce, replicate via the transfer of high energy electrons. So in a thermodynamic sense, the entire biosphere is the transfer, life is the transfer of high energy electrons through the biosphere. The ultimate source of these high energy electrons for the biosphere on the surface of the planet is the sun. So ultimately, all life on Earth takes the low entropy output of the sun and uses that to lower their internal entropy. And this requires the release of heat, waste energy, releasing high entropy into the environment. And that is done by capturing the photons coming from the sun and converting those into high energy electrons. That is the foundation of all life on the surface of the planet. And that's done by our photosynthesizing organisms, the blue-green bacteria, algae, and plants. Now, there is one, well, probably more than one, but one that we know of, exception to that ultimate source of low entropy, and that's in the hydrothermal vents, the deep sea vents at the bottom of the ocean, where there are a special class of organisms that capture the low entropy of the center of the Earth to lower their entropy and have negentropy. So those are the tube worms and the associated archaea bacteria that do chemosynthesis, often sulfur reduction in the deep sea, which is very interesting because it's the one circumstance where we can compare what a biosphere would look like that isn't entirely reliant on the low entropy of a star. So in a thermodynamic sense, life can be explained as far from equilibrium thermodynamic activity. So using these high energy inputs to create order and lower the entropy of the system. How can you create negentropy work? Negentropy is achieved via work. And that's kind of one of the realities of life, is that oftentimes things kind of want to go towards that high entropy state. And I don't know about for all of you, but for me, it seems like a lot of the day is spent trying to bring things back into a lower entropy state, i.e. doing a lot of work to fight that growing tide towards a high entropy state. And really, that is exactly what is occurring inside the cell. It's doing work to fight that tendency towards high entropy, i.e. Disorder, breakdown. And the way that it gets the energy to do that work is via these high energy electrons. In the case of plants, from the sun, and in the case of heterotrophic organisms like ourselves, from eating plants and doing breaking down the chemicals in them to derive high energy electrons. Now, so that's the very kind of straightforward thermodynamic answer to the question. It can get a lot more intricate if we begin to consider the function, the information feedback feed forward function of the space memory network, because the ultimate low entropy source is not the sun or a star. The ultimate low entropy source is the vacuum state. So in terms of the information content of the vacuum state, it has infinite low entropy modes, so that at the macroscopic scale that we're at, where it seems like things have a tendency to go towards higher entropy, it can always be replenished, i.e. you can always get neg entropy by coupling with the vacuum structure. The vacuum structure has infinite low entropy states. And this is important on like a personal level, like your health, your physical, mental well-being. The greater you can couple to that vacuum structure, the information structure of the space memory network, the more you can increase the coherent ordering and organizational synergy of your own cellular system and your own physical and mental states. So actually, there's the thermodynamic sense where you do a lot of work to get negentropy and lower the increasing entropy state of you and your environment. But then there's also, a more subtle level where like doing mental practices, meditative type practices, centering practices, to bring yourself into greater alignment and have more coupling with the information structure of the space memory network that brings negentropy too. So, that has important personal applications, but also in kind of like the theoretical purview, it has very interesting cosmological consequences because one of the things that we might partake as an exercise is to consider what is the ultimate fate of the universe. We can plot the evolution and development of the universe fairly well, going back 13.8 billion years, and we're getting more and more of a complete picture of what it looks like now. Well, if we project out, what do we expect it to look like? And right now, the predominant consensus within cosmology and science is that the universe will continue to increase in entropy following that second law of thermodynamics, and it will undergo entropy death, a heat death, i.e. all low entropy states, all useful information will be converted into waste products, heat with high entropy and no information content. That's the consensus right now within science. Now, the unified physics that we're working on, though, shows why that is not going to happen, why that's not the case. Mainly because the forces and the ordering dynamics that are organizing the evolution and development of the universe are coming from the infinite low entropy states of the quantum vacuum. So the universe has access to infinite numbers of low entropy states. So you always have a balance between the increase in entropy and negentropy. And interestingly, the primary sites of negentropy in the universe are black holes, black hole, white hole systems. Those are actually places where you have negentropy. So, we can point to plenty of places in the universe that we can see, we can say it's increasing in entropy, but, we can't really see many of the black holes. It was just last year that they got the first image of a black hole. So and that's also the proverbial dark matter. So we haven't had a lot of time of observing those systems. Those systems are where you have negentropy. And, so not only are those the core sites of the universe, of galaxies, where the increasing entropy is being balanced with negentropy, interestingly, that's also probably the place where you're seeing the transition from abiotic systems to the living system, the ultimate negentropy. So I think that that's going to be a area of discovery that is going to really change the perspective, the purview within science on the information dynamics of the universe.
Yeah, well said, William. Deep dive.
Deep dive.
Richard, any brief response? Would you like to unmute and share anything?
Fantastic answer. So fantastic, it will take me all of this week to understand it or even begin to understand it. But a few comments. There are many things exciting about negentropy. one is life extension,
Hmm.
that this is the ability to extend your life hundreds of years if we could make it happen and understand it. The maybe the next interesting thing is that apparently the body is able to create these high energy electrons. And so we have that ability built into us. Now, how high is high energy electrons? How high do we need to go?
If you look at the electron orbital energy levels of a atom, the energy levels that we're talking about are the energy levels that knock the electron out of all of the electron orbitals. So we're talking about basically ionized electrons, electrons that have had the sufficient energy to actually decouple them from the nucleus. The primary site of these high energy electrons is the pigment chlorophyll in the chloroplast of plants. Now, offhand, I don't know the exact numerical number value for that amount of energy, but could almost calculate it here and now, because it's going to be the exact quantum equivalent of the frequency of yellow light predominantly, because the chlorophyll pigment is exactly tuned quantum mechanically so that the wavelength of a yellow light photon is exactly, it's absorbed, and it's exactly the energy level that will free the electron from the molecule. And from there, actually, it gets very interesting, because that electron goes into like a quantum mechanical state of what's called like an exciton. And when in the chloroplast stroma, when it's freed from the chlorophyll pigment, it is actually in a quantum mechanical state. And what has been observed is that it will essentially quantum tunnel to the photoreaction center of the chloroplast system. These electrons basically are forming quantum coherent states where they're transferred after absorbing a photon. They're transferred with 100% efficiency to the photoreaction center, where the high energy electrons are used to fuse together carbon dioxide and water to make hydrocarbons, i.e. Sugar. The plants store that high energy electron essentially in the bonds of the hydrocarbons. From there, that hydrocarbon is a chain of carbons with protons on them, bunch of hydrogens. And so the system that life uses is that it will take those hydrocarbons, it'll pluck a proton off of the carbon chain, free a high energy electron, and use that to do work. And that work it uses to lower the entropy of the system, i.e. Negentropy. And just real quick to touch on what you were saying in terms of like longevity. So for us, heterotrophs, so that's compared to autotrophic organisms. Autotrophic are organisms that make their own food. And plants, green, blue, bacteria, and algae are the only organisms that are autotrophs. They make their own food from electromagnetic radiation. Us heterotrophs take those hydrocarbons from the autotrophs, and we pull those protons off of the carbon backbone, and the place that we do that is in the mitochondria. And we use those protons and those high energy electrons to spin a rotor, a nano rotor, a nano machine that spins up to 60,000 miles per second, 60,000 rotations per second, sorry. So we shuttle these protons and high energy electrons through that. That's how we get the energy to do the work, to lower the entropy and to maintain a negentropic state. One of the things that we're looking at is how without those hydrocarbons, without any food source, the ATP synthase is still able to generate energy. We believe that it's able to couple to the quantum vacuum and access the ultimate low entropy state of the quantum vacuum. So, when you were saying like our ability to produce our own high energy electrons, we do believe that is occurring. And, a lot of the question is, to what degree can you couple the mitochondria to the vacuum structure to get access to that ultimate low entropy state, to get that energy to maintain negentropy without what is conventionally recognized as a food source. And that is tied intricately to longevity, lifespan. Pretty much the efficiency and ability of the cell to couple the ATP synthase to the information structure of the space memory network. That is the degree to which the cell is healthy and will maintain a negentropic state.
Well, thank you. Now, here's what I was looking for is how much voltage do I need to accelerate an electron to make negentropy happen? And it's from the old picture tubes, electron gun, cathode ray picture tubes. Those were about 20,000 volts. And so that'd be easy to do. But I think the yellow light is 500,000 electron volts is the approximate energy.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that's getting up more into the voltage that Nikola Tesla used on his Wardenclyffe tower. And so I see a connection there. Oh, so I think he had maybe 20 million volts or something like that. But that would give me a calibration of what I needed to do if I wanted to just make this with existing technology.
Uh-huh.
So Wardenclyffe tower would be a lot of work.
Yeah. No, but they have measured the voltage inside cells using like nanometer-sized voltmeters, and it is like millions of volts per meter. I mean, extremely high energy environment.
Now, here's I don't know if Adam's still listening, but I was reading something that implied that the body chemistry produces really high energy electrons when they're sucked into the micro black hole. And that the geometry of the chemistry is such that that they exceed the speed of light and enter this region of less than a Planck length, and that there's some connection there that can achieve this super high energy and well, super high organization and super negentropy. So so you may run into that somewhere in your reading. That certainly fascinated me. And and that's a toss-up. It's easier maybe for me to try to figure out how to do this with my own body than it is to build some mechanical gadget that would do it.
I'd say you're absolutely right on that. And partially because your body's already doing that. Like my input to this whole conversation would be to say that the universe is operating with syntropic, as I like to say, rather than negentropic, because it's like saying, it's like as if entropy is the foundation, then we're saying it's negative entropy. And I just think that's less true than syntropy being the foundation and entropy being like the result of certain closed systems that we witness. But when we look from like a syntropic lens, what we see is we see a massive universe that was completely not organized, that was just energy, like in massive amounts of hot, cold alchemy, gases, basically, that have organized themselves into stars, which then have organized themselves through exploding as supernovas into higher forms of matter, which have then organized themselves into planets, which have then organized themselves into all of the different types of matter and into life, and then have organized themselves all the way to the point where I'm sitting here as a self-organized output of the universe with complete, conscious control over my entire system, and am having a vibrational sound-based conversation with you through a system that I organized and that we as humans organized out of matter to enable my voice to turn into electrons, travel across the earth, vibrate a membrane called a speaker on your end so that you're hearing me speak to you. I mean, if that's not organization, I don't know. I don't know what it is. I mean, you look at the whole pattern of the universe and the entire thing is self-organizing, is syntropic, is coming into greater information complexity and order, to be blunt about it. And it's amazing that we have such a hard time, I think, as a collective scientific body, actually seeing all of that. And the root of that, I believe, is in what you're talking about, Richard, which is that there is a mechanism built in to the proton itself and the micro wormhole network that connects protons that is facilitating that ordering principle through feedback. And, I'd say it doesn't look like a whole electron in most cases entering a proton and being absorbed into the proton down into its singularity. But the question really is, what is an electron? If we go off of Amir Val-Baker's work and we go off of some of the generalized proofs that emerge from looking at the proton as a structure of Planck spherical units in a field of Planck spherical units, and the Planck spherical units, the little oscillators of the vacuum, are being pulled by that proton. That pulled field is really just a wave of the movement of space-time. That's all it is just space-time itself moving. And we measure the overall charge of that movement as being the electron field. And we count it, we quantize it in certain ways by saying, okay, there's this much electricity in each kind of layer of this field at different rates of spin around this core. And each of those different layers, we count as different amounts of electrons. But the field itself is actually what's moving. And the field itself that's moving is also going into the proton. So there is, to some extent, electronic energy, or it's Planck spherical units, tiny electromagnetic field oscillations entering the proton at all times, going into that singularity, accelerating through that sub-Planckian singularity, and then basically feedbacking out, radiating out information back into the surrounding surface of the proton and through its entangled network, allowing it to communicate and allowing it to create, patterns and order, and whatever the driver of that is, which we could postulate as maybe consciousness itself, as I like to think of, underlying space-time behind the scenes here. It's consciousness, it's awareness, it's the essence of awareness seeking to be aware of itself, consciousness seeking to be aware of itself, driving the feedback, driving the mechanisms, so that there is new materials that emerge. There is new structures made out of the protons. There is new formats. And when we extend that into the body, yeah, of course, it makes sense. Our body is constantly learning, growing, developing cells and evolving, in the moment based on our experience and in the feedback that we're having with the rest of the universe. And consciousness has a huge role to play in that. Because we know now scientifically that my beliefs about my own body, what I'm holding in my awareness about my own body, actually drives cellular change. So I can literally make myself sick and I can make myself healthy based on my perspective on how I'm holding the underlying field of consciousness that is then propagating through my Planck spherical units, protons, cells, DNA structures, tissues, organ systems, like the whole system, right? So, yeah.
Oh, I have a simple way of remembering this. I like to say that the Planck micro wormhole network produces matrix inversion, which produces negative entropy. It converts maximum disorder, maximum entropy, to maximum order, maximum negentropy. And I think I can explain, well, not here, but I think there's an explanation where you can almost figure out exactly the wiring diagram of how you would connect all of these protons and micro wormhole networks and get that result. But it's exactly as you say, it's the feedback system and the network of every proton connected to every other proton.
Yeah.
So we're living in exciting times. I'm not sure I'll be able to make it this week, but I'm looking forward to making negentropy.
Sounds good, Richard. Thank you so much for joining us, man. Thanks for jumping on and being with us live. It's good to see you.
Thank you.
I'm going to switch you back out to attendee, and we can take on the next question here. Let's see. I guess it's my turn, even though I contributed quite a bit to that last one. Do you want me to go?
Yeah, please.
Let's see. All right. I think I'm going to take on the most unified physics oriented question here, which to me looks like Luke Archambault's question. He says, can you please explain in which ways the four forces are all manifestations of the dynamics of the double torus? So how do we get all the forces out of the double torus? I think really to address that properly, and I'll bring you on here, Luke, so that you can come in if you want to join us as a panelist for a minute. It's important to just say that I don't know if the kind of wrapper for this is to say the double torus is the answer, like it is the thing and it answers all the questions. It's, I'd say, fundamental, but there's not necessarily crystalline structure inherent to the double torus. For example, like we think of the double torus and we just think of this wave of light spinning and moving, and it's just like a field moving. But some of the operations of the double torus in the way that I described the proton are extremely applicable. And I think that if we translate the sort of next level of the double torus to the proton as the ultimate model of that, then we get the answer to the four forces. And that answer being emergent through understanding the proton itself. It's like getting the fundamental thing. So first off, let's talk about gravity. Gravity is pretty easy because gravity is basically it's the structure of space-time itself experienced in curvature or in motion, right? So when we move through space-time, we get the concept really easily of G-force, right? You hit the gas in the car, you speed up and you feel G-force. That's gravitational force. It's because you're pushing against space-time. So you're feeling the flow of space-time on you. But when you're standing on a planet, you drop your arms, it's gravity. You're feeling the flow of space-time down into the planet. Why is that happening? Well, because space-time around the planet is in curvature, and because it's curved and going in towards this singularity center, that curvature is creating a flow of space-time that's moving in the system. And so we're in this pool of space-time that's both spinning and vortexing and curving in, and we experience it generally as going kind of straight down towards the core of the planet because we're riding on the planet with the whole field that's turning, right? And so the double torus, i.e. the proton, explains gravity by saying that, well, all that's happening here is you have this equilibrium lattice, and because of the pentagonal vortices, suddenly you get curvature. And because there's that curvature, and that curvature is creating a tension, that tension is then pulling as the proton spins on the surrounding space, causing more other areas to curve in. But it's because it's spinning at the speed of light, the effect is very minimal until you get a bunch of these things all together, lots and lots of protons. And as you have lots and lots of protons, they are all together creating a curvature of the field of space-time. They're creating a collective pull on the field that eventually gets to the scale of the planet. So gravity, there we go. Electromagnetism is not as easy to just kind of like say, well, it's just the geometry that gives us electromagnetism, because actually everything we're talking about is electromagnetism. Everything we're talking about, the Planck spherical units, are actually just the highest frequency oscillations of the electromagnetic spectrum. So all of it is electromagnetic oscillation, right? And all of that electromagnetic oscillation is forming that tensegrity structure and the curvature. And I like to think of the sort of hexagonal lattice, the triangulated tetrahedral lattice of the whole thing, as the ultimate conductivity mechanism for electromagnetic energy to flow through this whole system. And not just, at Planck scale vibration, but in larger aggregate flows where the whole field is pulsing and vibrating together at larger and larger waves and smaller waves down to Planck scale, so that there's this entire symphony of waves, and the whole field is pulsing at everything from super high vibration down to extremely low vibration, galactic rays coming down through the planet, passing right through us, and we don't even know it. So it's all electromagnetic. Now, strong force is easy because Nassim did a pretty good job solving for that one. And the answer there is it's actually just gravity, but it's the structure of the proton and the double torus, and the spin of that proton going at the speed of light around the equator, which is my piece of the addition to his work there, that it's the equator going at the speed of light that we're actually saying is that speed. And that because of the crystalline structure, it's not going the speed of light as you go towards the pole. It's slowing down. And this gives this very special condition where the structure of the whole thing is operating as if it's floating and massless. But once you get something else close enough to it, especially near the poles, once it gets close enough to that thing, there's a distance, and that distance is what we call the Yukawa potential, the fall off distance. Once you cross that distance, it has the full gravitational pull of energy force that would be there, as if it was a full black hole floating in space, curving all of space, pulling everything into it. We have this massive amount of energy that occurs within that very short range. But as soon as you're out of that range, they're both like spinning spaceships. But as soon as they get close enough to each other, boom, they pull into the torsion and the tensegrity and the energy of each of those Planck spherical units bonds. That's where we get strong force. Now, weak force is a little bit more complicated and interesting, but fortunately I've done most of a paper on this, and it's still one of those ones on my side desk with my physics hat that hasn't been finished, but is close. And I have the basic premises all down. Really comes down to understanding what a neutron is. And it's about the understanding that when you have in the nucleus of any atom, you've got basically protons bonded together at those polar regions by that strong force, right? They're within a certain range that the field of torsion and tensegrity is now pulling them together. They're bonded and they're spinning together. Now, in a lot of the structural alignments, especially polar alignments where the axes are aligned, they're spinning together, they're bonded together. And so because of that, there's what I call conservation of spin occurring. So the amount of force that those two balls together are having on the surrounding spacetime is not 2 times the amount that one ball has. It's a little more than one ball, but they're sharing the pull with each other. Now, if you have another one that's like coming off of, say, one of the vector vortice angles off the top or the bottom of the proton to a diagonal, and you have a more complex structure, you're going to have more complex waveform in terms of how it's pulling the spacetime. The vortex is going to be more complicated. And that's what we get when we get more complex, atomic structures and more complex nuclei. However, as we do that, what we're generally seeing is that it's actually just protons, and it's because of conservation of spin through this geometric alignment that we call half of those neutrons, because there's less positive charge than we think should be there. And it's because they're sharing that charge. They're sharing that pull on the surrounding spacetime with each other, spinning together. And so the amount of pull in the surrounding spacetime, negative charge, is directly proportional to that growth, but there's enough shared that there's about double generally of the amount of actual protons as is there. So then what happens is we pop off one of these protons, right? And we're like, hey, look, it's not pulling a bunch of electrons, right? It's a neutron. But there's only this like split second that we see that this thing, once it's freed from that collective spin state, it's now resetting and creating from scratch a new torsion of its own, right? Like it's starting to pull a portion of the field that wasn't spinning with it before. So you can think of it as like, it spins off, and then all of a sudden the space-time starts to crank up around it because it's spinning so fast. And as space-time is getting pulled up and cranked up around it, then we're calling that the release of the WZ boson. We're calling that the decay of the neutron to a proton. But the decay is not actually a decay at all. It's actually just the independence of that proton now exerting its own independent force on space-time outside of the context of the rest of the nucleus, right? Because W and Z bosons don't exist unless we do that. Like none of these things exist except in this one context. And there's just not been a good holistic geometric framework to look at these operations within physics. And so it's all kind of mathematics, and it's all generalized, and it's all a little abstracted to try to describe it. But the math totally starts to work out when you start to see these independent torsion fields that are being created, and you're starting to look at each thing as pulling spacetime. So I'll leave it at that because I could go into more complexity, but I think that's generally Unified Physics 101 by Adam Apollo right there.
That's all I can think anyway, but that's amazing. It's more complex than that in one single little torus we see this and this and that, but now I can see it's at different scales, and
awesome.
Wow. Thank you so much,
Awesome.
Alan.
Yeah, such a pleasure, man. Thanks. Great question. Man. Great question. All right. Take care, Luke. All right. Back to you, William. What you got, buddy?
So somebody was asking what is on my whiteboard. I don't know how mobile my camera is to give you a view here, but that might be about as close as I can get. But so down here, this is the event of biogenesis. So this is the formation of the first information carrying molecule. So this is where you transition from chemical networks to an autocatalytic system. And what this is showing here is a hypercyclic autocatalytic system. I've got other diagrams that I've produced of this where you can actually see the hypercycles, which are necessary for an autocatalytic system that has an information carrying molecule to grow exponentially while maintaining faithful replication of the memory of the system. In this case, chemical networks for biosynthesis. So this is pretty exciting because it's showing how the first genome emerged to produce the first living system. And I don't know if we can see that at all, but then there's also some work we're doing on the ATP synthase, found in the mitochondria. So those are actually calculations on the coupling of the ATP synthase to the quantum energy of the vacuum structure. So we're also using that. You can see kind of like a electronics diagram there. We're also kind of looking at how via resonance, we can potentially boost the efficiency of the ATP synthase to get greater coherent coupling to the vacuum structure, which would result in greater coherent coupling of all the ATP synthase in the mitochondrial membrane. And this will have significant effects on cellular energy and longevity. So, you can use like meditative techniques to couple yourself, to align yourself more harmoniously with the information feedback feed forward structure of the space memory network, the quantum vacuum. But you can also augment that technologically via resonance. And I think that's already occurring to some degree with sound, music, and with Nassim Haramein's invention of the harmonic flux resonator. So, we're looking at that for direct applications with health and longevity. So there's a little a view of some of the stuff I've been working on, and the whiteboard kind of serves to keep it down and keep it there until I can get it onto paper. Now, so that was just real quick. One of the questions though I did want to touch on is from Nadi Hanna. She says,
Great. I was going to say maybe you should take that one as a finale, because it kind of goes out into some other realms, and it might be a fun way to close. We've been doing some hard science, and might be good to explore a little philosophy too.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So Nadi asks, have worked with Mary Rodwell exploring the new human as resulting from genetic modification of human DNA? Can you talk about the dormant genetic regions that are being integrated into the biological systems and how this is occurring in all of us to produce expanded awareness? For folks who may not know some of my history, and in particular how I began working with Nassim, One of the ways is that during my graduate studies, both at the New York University and the University of Hawaii at Manoa, I was doing genetics research, and one of the questions that I was looking to answer was, what are the genetic mechanisms that separate humans from chimpanzees, humans from our most closely related species, genetically speaking? And this was a fairly perplexing question because in terms of the genetic similarity between humans and our closely related species like chimpanzees and bonobos, there's anywhere from about 99.8 to 98.5 to 99% sequence homology, that is genetic similarity. So in about 98.5 to 99% of the genome of a randomly selected bonobo and a randomly selected human, you can find no differences. Now, 99% is most of the DNA. However, that is referring to the DNA that is called the gene coding sequences. Now, within conventional, traditional evolutionary theory, the gene coding sequences are all that matter. And it's changes in the gene coding sequences over time that leads to divergences in phenotype, that is physical traits. The genes go for proteins that make physical traits. And so an accumulation of small changes over time lead to divergences in appearance, and eventually you get what looks like two different species. But it's very difficult to imagine how 1 to 1.5% difference can account for the differences in genotype, can account for the differences between humans and bonobos, especially when you consider that if you were to select any two random people, the amount of difference in their gene coding sequences is about 1 to 1.5%. So, it's like, obviously not the source of this speciation. So, obviously, the source of these physical traits, the differences in the physical traits, the phenotypes, is coming from the other part of the DNA, what's commonly referred to as like non-coding or regulatory regions of the DNA. And so I discussed that because Nadi was asking about the dormant regions of the DNA. So how are those being activated to increase the awareness of humans today? So another breakdown of percentages of the genome is that about 50% of the human genome are what are called repeating nucleotide sequences. These are also sometimes called satellite DNA because they're long repeating segments that flank gene coding sections of the DNA. So there's satellite regions of gene coding DNA. It's about 50% of the genome. About 49% are endogenous retroviral gene elements. So elements that come from viruses, DNA that has been inserted into the genome. And that leaves about 1 to 1.5% of our genome that is protein coding sequences or conventional gene coding sequences. From my research and my work, what I was finding is that those non-coding, those regions of the DNA that are not the conventional protein coding regions, the non-coding and regulatory regions, Those are the most important, some of the most important regions of the DNA, particularly in producing new traits. And you can see that in the term of regulatory regions, because what these retroviral elements, which include transposable DNA elements, so these are, I think a layman term for them is jumping genes, sections of the DNA that can jump around. So what these regulatory elements do is that they can take a gene and they can change its expression so that instead of making like one gene product, it can make many different novel gene products from one gene. And so this is a way for rapid expanded evolution because you don't have to wait around to produce a new gene. You can take an existing gene, tweak its product a little bit and get a new product. When you look at what it is that caused the divergence in our species from other closely related species, it's these gene regulatory regions, these non-coding regions, which are mostly foreign DNA. DNA that comes into the organism, is inserted into the organism from a foreign source. So, these regions are very prone to what's called horizontal gene transfer. Another kind of conventional idea in the history of the tree of life is that all hereditary information is passed down linearly from parent to offspring. But actually, some of the most important information changes in the web of life occur via horizontal gene transfer, not from parent to offspring, from one sister organism to another horizontally, or even from one species to another. During this investigation, I came across one of these elements called the Lu element, which was extremely fascinating and is what I identified as one of the key gene elements responsible for producing the human species, the physical traits of the human species. This gene element has some very interesting characteristics to it, some of which to me appear to be engineered, intelligently engineered. I say that because during that time, I was doing graduate work on fusion protein constructs, where we would take, I would take two genes and fuse them together to get novel functionality. That's something that like these splicing mechanisms, natural splicing mechanisms that gene regulatory regions do in our genome. Well, the way that you would get these fusion constructs is via a linker sequence, a nucleotide linker sequence. This Lu element has a linker sequence. It's a fusion product, which to this day, I only know two examples of. Gene engineering via scientists, human scientists, and the Lu element, which is ostensibly naturally occurring. So one of the things that brought me to work with Nassim is our investigation of this gene element and its potential as a genetic element that was inserted into early humans to produce modern humans. And if there was ever a genetic engineering construct that I would use to do that myself, it would be the Lu retrotransposon. It is a absolutely fascinating genetic element. And I can get into some detail on all the myriad things it does. For instance, one extremely interesting thing is it performs what's called adenosine to ionosine RNA editing. So what that does is you've got a gene coding sequence, you produce an RNA transcript that is U, A, G, and C, RNA nucleotides. What the ALU retrotransposable element can do is it can come in and it can change those nucleotides. It can change the RNA transcript sequence so that essentially you have a gene that's coding for a specific product. The ALU comes in, changes the sequence in the RNA, and you get a different product. And so, this is one way that you can get punctuated rapid evolution or speciation. I saw there was a couple of folks who had raised their hands. So are there questions? Should I pause for a moment?
Yeah, William, okay. I'll just say, unfortunately, I have to actually jump off because I have another call, and we're already over our hour and a half window, I believe, today. Are we? Is that right? Yeah, I think we are. This is true. Yes.
Yep.
What day is it here?
1:37 here.
That's right. 2:37. Yeah. So I have a 2:30 here in Mountain Time that I got to go jump onto, but I will leave you to keep taking it because this is a beautiful place of study, and I think you have a lot more to offer. If there's people that have questions around this, go at it, dude. Awesome. And it's just such a pleasure to be here with you, William, and always love and enjoy these sessions with you, man. And I feel like we're able to get really deep into a lot of good content together. So really such a pleasure, buddy. And I look forward to hanging out again soon.
Awesome. Yeah, always a pleasure. Definitely looking forward to maybe a call before too long and our next Residence Academy Q&A with you.
Yeah, likewise, man. Feel free to reach out anytime. You can text me anytime. We can plan a Zoom and we can sync up. Thank you, everybody, for your awesome feedback, and loved reading all of your comments and questions. And I responded to some of you guys with text in the Q&A as well, when they were just kind of little side questions. So if you wrote a question in the Q&A, if you check the answered box, you might see that I responded to a couple of them there. So thank you guys, and have an absolutely great day and a great weekend. And by the way, happy Samhain, blessed be. And whether you celebrate All Hallows Eve or Dia de los Muertos or Samhain, I send blessings to your passages and crossing in this time of the thin veils where we're seeing the intersection of consciousness and space-time, real time before our eyes. It's the magic of the spirit world. And take care, everybody. See you again.
I got muted for a minute there. So let me see. I've kind of got the wheel now. Let me see if I can bring Naughty on to ask some of her questions. Just 1 second.
I can do it, William, if you need.
Oh, okay, if you could, yeah. I'm not seeing where you go to bring people on. Because I see she's got a lot of questions on what I was saying.
Hey, William.
Hi.
Hey, good to see you, man.
Good to see you. Thank you for the question.
Thanks for taking the question. It's a bit of a fascination and preoccupation for me lately. So, wow, that was just so much great information because I usually come at it from the ET hybridization program. So, that's just really fun.
Yeah.
So let's see. One of the questions that I had, okay, so like changing the transcript sequence and how do you spell the ALU? How is that?
It's ALU.
Okay, because I knew that ALOO wasn't right. Okay, so horizontal gene transfer. So we're talking about intelligences, advanced intelligences that know how to do this, right?
Yeah.
And that's the fun part. And so that's a whole conversation that I don't know is quite for this platform, but I'm so curious about that piece, and it's fun to hear that was the original piece that brought you on with Nassim's work. Yeah, that's really fun. So, okay, here's my question. So I've been working with a lot of people lately about the hybridization program, and you're in Mary Rodwell's presentation about having talked about sort of the intrinsic understanding of DNA and all of that you've been talking about. And thank you so much. This was so awesome. Part of the conversation is the advanced interpretation of DNA that includes like the holographic, aspects of the dark, the junk, or the non-coding DNA, right? So holographic nature and interdimensional nature of DNA. Can you've got the scientific here. Can you talk a little bit about, is there the science that indicates that?
Yeah. It's really unfortunate because we don't have a good name for this DNA.
Right.
That is, 98 to 99% of our genome, because, it got the historical moniker junk DNA. But, if you look at the source of that, it comes from early calculations on the number of genes. It was actually a Japanese researcher. He was able to calculate mathematically the number of genes that should be present to make the human. And he compared that to the amount of DNA that was known. And this was in the 70s. So this is before there was really molecular biology, molecular genetics. So DNA was still kind of a black box. But, he was able to actually show remarkably close the number of genes and compared it to the actual known amount of DNA. I think then it was something like, it might have actually been like, he calculated around 20% of the genome is gene coding sequences proper, that is coding for proteins that do work and build structural components of the cell. But even that at that point was like unbelievable, because it's like, well, so there's 80% of our genome that it isn't doing anything. Is it just junk? That, right. And that's actually kind of how he posed the question. And then it just kind of stuck that, it's junk DNA. But of course, from the 70s, we kind of developed, and the scientists developed molecular genetics techniques and was able to show the functionality of this DNA. And, now it's obviously, not junk, because, it contains.
Oh, God.
Yeah, because, it contains hundreds of thousands of regulatory gene elements.
Right.
And, so over the course of human evolution, humans becoming the modern version of our species, there have been hundreds of thousands of insertions of DNA into our genome. I'm sorry, I need to reword that a little bit. There have been a lot of insertions of foreign DNA into our genome that have introduced hundreds of thousands of gene regulatory elements.
Okay.
But so, what do we call it? And it's kind of, I think the reason that we don't have a good name for it is because we still don't fully understand it. So we don't really have the technical terminology to describe exactly what it is. Even non-coding DNA isn't a good name for it. It's one that I kind of fall back on because it codes, it produces reverse transcriptase proteins. Proteins that will take RNA, turn it into DNA and insert it into the genome, so I mean it codes for it, also makes proteins, so it's not like it's non-coding.
Right. Why don't we call it advanced DNA? We have advanced DNA parts of us, right?
And actually a name that I kind of experimented with a little bit was altruistic DNA. Because this is DNA. I like advanced DNA also, but this is DNA that has been shared. It's DNA that's shared.
Yeah, that's part of the problem, right? We can't go past that barrier of like who's sharing it. So, to talk about the advanced capacities, we're opening up serious cans of worms. But I really like altruistic DNA, and it really like, I wish we could get past that idea that there are other advanced influences, and I wish we could see ourselves. I feel like we're a little bit primitive, but we can't really do all that. So
for myself, I'm kind of getting a little bit past the point of tiptoeing around.
Oh, good.
Describing it. I mean, just because there's been official documentation and releases from U.S. government sources of these advanced craft, and the officials that are releasing video, images, and documentation of these advanced craft are pretty adamant that it's not us. It's not our adversaries or other countries. So it's pretty obvious that these are craft from off-world,
right. But that's a great leap, because people get really preoccupied with the craft. So like to go from, oh yes, that it's really happening, to gene insertion is like, it's a stretch for most people to think about larger influences. And I mean, even though it's a millennia of, this reality, but
but it's like, okay, so if we do get to the point where we accept that there are other advanced intelligent civilizations in our neighborhood, in our galactic neighborhood, if you look at the technological implications of that, it means that they are capable of interstellar travel. One of the things about the physics of the relativity of interstellar travel is that it's more appropriately called time travel. When you're traveling interstellar distances, you are, in effect, traveling through time. This is exemplified in Einstein's twins paradox, where you have one twin that stays on Earth and another twin that visits Alpha Centauri at some proportion of the speed of light and comes back, and one of the twins has aged 4 years and the other is aged a couple days, because one of them was time traveling. So it's just what that means is that you're talking now about deep time. So any advanced intelligent civilizations that are present, this isn't something that's just been occurring in the last 50 years or 70 years. You're talking about deep time. So I mean, in terms of Earth's terrestrial history, easily going back hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years.
Right.
The way that other advanced intelligent civilizations arise throughout the galaxy, it's not all at once. So, I mean, there are advanced intelligent civilizations that could have arisen hundreds of millions of years ago relative to Earth's timeline.
Right.
And even billions of years ago. And so actually, if you look at the work of the father of molecular genetics, this is Dr. Crick. He published a paper with the organic chemist, Dr. Orgel. And the title of their paper was Directed Panspermia. And
Right.
And
I've used this in my talks about genetic modification, because he actually just admits that it had to be something else, right? Sorry to jump in. It's just so exciting.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so this Dr. Crick is oftentimes credited as identifying DNA. It's really more that he proved, along with Watson, that DNA is the hereditary molecule of the biological system. But then he went on to decode the DNA to show how it actually codes information. He delineated the transcriptional mechanism of DNA, so DNA being transcribed into RNA. He delineated the translational mechanism, that is how the codon code of DNA is translated into proteins. So essentially the father of molecular biology here. And one of his most exciting papers was on his conjecture that life originated on Earth via essentially implantation, being seeded by a advanced extraterrestrial civilization, an advanced civilization from another solar system.
Yeah, that was slightly progressive back in that day, right?
Well, no, because actually, if you go back, like in the 19th century, it was actually kind of a predominant theory that life arrived on Earth via panspermia.
Okay.
It was actually very popular. And actually, I think even within the 19th century, there was discussion of, intelligent civilizations bringing life to the early Earth.
Oh, what happened? Where'd we go wrong?
Well,
so close.
Part of it fell into disfavor with the kind of concerted discrediting campaign that occurred in the 50s on the idea of extraterrestrial species. Because, before then, it wasn't like the domain of crazy people. I mean, actually, most scientists thought that the planets around us probably had life and things like intelligent beings like humans. I mean, most astronomers thought that Mars was probably inhabited with life and beings like intelligent species. And there was just really an inflection point around the 1950s where there was a concerted effort to reframe the question of life outside of Earth as a preoccupation of the mentally unstable.
Yes. I'm proud, man.
So I mean, it's if you look at that, I mean, it's really kind of coming from more political and national security type issues, because it's like around that time there became increasing numbers of credible reports of advanced craft, and the consensus was we need to debunk and discredit these reports and these sightings because it could lead to like a national panic, and also
the liberation of the human species. I don't know.
Well, yeah. So but basically, essentially, science suffered as a result of it, because what is a totally logical and completely legitimate question of other intelligent beings like ourselves in the universe became somehow stigmatized and something that you just didn't want to discuss if you wanted to maintain credibility. But, I think, though, we kind of got past that. And actually, we're at another inflection point where it's like it's becoming, I think, more it's coming back into the scientific discourse as a legitimate question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's so cool because it really partners with Mary's work and, all of the folks that are talking about the new humans and, the star kids and how we haven't understood their multidimensional nature. And so I really love how, the science that was part of why I wanted to ask, the science is here to support that evolutionary track, evolutionary process. It is an exciting time. Did you say inflection? No.
Yeah, kind of like an inflection point.
Inflection. Okay.
Yeah.
And I've heard that DNA is the currency of the universe, right? Like we're just starting to learn the language. I mean, I don't mean to lump us all together. I know there's some advanced folks that have been moving in that way, but I know we're probably out of time. It's 2:00, but thank you so much. I'm going to go back and, really watch this to get all of the awesome details that you've given about the molecular biology of our DNA. But it's the holographic, like interdimensional part that I was really, I'm really jazzed about. So thank you.
Yeah. So, I'm working on developing content for all of this that will be available on the Resonance Academy.
All right.
So, it's it's a lot of information. So it's going to take some time to get it, all collated and discussed in a way that is accessible. But yeah, definitely, I hope to have all this information accessible so that you can really dive into all the details and have it accessible. Yeah.
Cool. That's where we're going, right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the question. There's just a lot we can get into on that. Maybe a little bit unfortunate that we're coming to the end of the session.
Yeah. Well, we'll do it next time. We'll do something else at some point. Yeah. Awesome. Call me.
Awesome.
Thanks, William. Thanks, everybody.
Yep. Yeah. So thank you, everyone, for joining. And I hope that you have a safe and fun weekend. And I'll look forward to our next Resonance Academy meeting where we can get into some more interesting science topics, unified physics, and maybe some genetic engineering, human hybridization questions. So thank you all and take care until the next time. Bye.